Well, here we are again. Beach's Motorcycle Adventures is now on quarantine. We're going nowhere. We're looking at nothing. We're enjoying no mountain passes. So we switch over to Beach's Audio Adventures. This is Rob Beach coming to you live and in person from Grand Island, New York. Hi, Mike.
Yeah, Rob. Good to talk to you again. Yeah, I'm just trying to stay warm here in the Great White North. I've poured myself a Kilchoman Scotch. It's Kilchoman. I thought I'd pour one of these. It's actually distilled from the tears of angels, is what they say. I poured a Scotch because our guest today, last time we rode with him, or I rode with him, was at the Isle of Man TT. And so I thought, a nice Scotch might help keep this warm. So our guest today is Ben Machamer. Hi, Ben. How's it going?
How you guys doing? Good to talk to you all.
Doing really good. So Ben's here to talk to us today, partly about choosing the right bike, because Ben came on tour with us a number of years ago, and it's a little bit more difficult for people who are a little bit closer to the ground, like Ben is. So we thought it might be a good idea to talk to you, Ben, and get some input from you.
Be happy to share with you what I've learned over the years.
Well, you are a Harley rider, right? Narrow V twins?
At the present, over the course of time, I've ridden just about everything. The one exception to that rule was indeed the BMWs, which has now changed. And I've gotten a fairly quick education on the models of the BMWs, and hopefully I can share some advice with what I've learned by picking two different models.
So how tall are you, Ben? What's your inseam?
I am 5'5". I used to describe my stature as stocky. That's slowly slipping to chubby. My inseam, I order 30-inch inseam jeans. There are an occasion or two where I need to put a cuff in those jeans. So I like to say that I have a 30-inch inseam. Obviously, this has not been a new problem to me when it comes to motorcycling. Since I first started riding as a child, I struggled with what model of bikes I could ride. So again, yes, there's some tips and tricks that I've learned along the way. And again, you learn to adapt.
Yeah, right on. And a lot of it is that learning. There's certain things you can do to help yourself out. It's things like that. So when you barely touch the ground, when you make mistakes, we've talked about this previously with, say, female riders, so a taller person, I make a mistake, I'm maybe less likely to drop the bike just because it's easier for me to touch the ground. And so me and you can make the same mistake, but because I can touch the ground a little bit easier, my bike doesn't hit the ground whereas yours does possibly, even though we've made the same mistake. And so sometimes it's just a little bit harder, I guess. You have to learn to adapt and change a few things.
And it is. I mean, again, Rob asked me the question. I somewhat sidestepped it. At current, I have a couple different bikes, but my daily rider, or my hour motorcycle, which my wife calls it, is a Harley Cruiser. I have a CVO Ultra, all of 800 and some odd pounds. I have made some modifications to it. Mainly the modification that I've learned to make over the years is to not touch the suspension. A lot of people make the mistake that, I need to lower the forks, I need to lower the shock. Without getting too technical, that changes a lot of the geometry of the motorcycle. So I've learned that sometimes the taller the suspension or the geometry of the motorcycle, the better it handles. So I try to do as much as I can out of the seat section, both in lowering it and narrowing it. You know, when your legs are spread too wide, you're obviously that much further from the ground. I haven't met a motorcycle yet, at least that I can remember quickly, that I've been flat-footed on. Many a bike, I've been on my tiptoes. I'd like to get on the balls of my feet. Again, a lot of people misunderstand that you need to be flat-footed. That's not necessarily true. The balls of your feet, you're just as stable there as can be.
What bike did you kind of learn on when you got your license? What did you start with dirt bikes, or what did you start?
I was fortunate enough that I lived in a very rural area here in the coal regions of Pennsylvania, where everybody had a dirt bike. So I lived in a neighborhood with a bunch of other young boys, and their parents started getting them motorcycles. And although my dad was not a fan of them, quote unquote, he felt this will get the speed out of his system. I'll buy him a motorcycle and it will calm him down. Quite to the contrary. But my first motorcycle was a 1972 Suzuki Trailhopper. Not quite as popular as the Honda Mini Trails, but it was Suzuki's answer to that. Honestly, I can't recall height-wise how that bike worked for me. I remember it was very wide seat, but I don't think I had issues with that. My second motorcycle was, and I don't recall the year, was a Suzuki TS 125. It had headlights and a tail light, but it was designed mostly for trails. I do remember on that motorcycle, literally on occasion, climbing on the bike with the kickstand down, starting the bike, put the bike in gear, take off, and put the kickstand up, and just the opposite when it came time to stop. Literally coming to a stop, flipping the kickstand down quick, and leaning to the left. So again, that's what I said. There's always a way around something, and that was the way I did it. Now with trail riding and riding in the woods, guys used to like to do streams. I hated streams because, just back to what you alluded to earlier, where you can dab your foot and keep going, it was another 12 or 14 inches for me to touch the bottom of the stream. So I was made fun of a lot by being the guy laying in the stream. But again, it didn't deter me, and made a lot of good memories.
Yeah, for sure. That's, a lot of times the good memories are of the mistakes, or when things go sideways. I always say, if you have an uneventful day, you're out riding, nothing really happened that stands out. Of course, you don't tend to remember that. You remember more of the time where, remember when I was lying on my back in the stream, and you didn't want to get wet, so you rode over top of me. Yeah, that was hilarious.
Exactly.
Yeah, thanks
right.
for the traction.
Yep, you're exactly correct.
The other point that you mentioned, in addition to seat height, is the width of the seat. And that's quite an interesting observation, I guess, for those of us that don't think about it often, is that the seat comfort and height is a combination of both the height of it and the width of it. Because if you've got a low seat, but your legs are splayed quite far left and right, you're actually defeating the purpose. That's something that Gretchen has pointed out with her inseam challenges when it comes to looking at motorcycles and getting on them, is that some bikes that have wider seats are really and truly difficult for her to deal with, because her legs are not at an angle that she can do things with, like pull it off the center stand, just because her legs are sticking out too far to the left or right. Whereas a narrower seat and a narrower bike make a big difference, even if the seat height is the same.
That was a big challenge on the Harley because, of course, cruisers have a nice, wide, comfy, as my wife calls it, the big sofa seat. And again, although Harley's weights are low to the ground, you take 800 pounds, and once you start to get a little bit more of a lean angle, with your feet being the only thing holding you up, you will tip over. So yeah, I really made a lot of effort to make my seat narrower. I probably lost a little bit of comfort in it, but again, I'm more stable at slow speeds or no speed.
So what did you choose for a bike for your first overseas tour?
Interesting story. Obviously, I did not know Rob at that time.
The good old days.
The good old days, yeah. How I got associated with Beaches was through a mutual friend of Rob's, and friend of mine, who had gone on a tour with Rob. And he called me and said, "Would you like to go see the Isle of Man TT?" Well, what motorcycle enthusiast doesn't want to go see the Isle of Man TT? So we signed up. And after I signed up, I started to think, oh boy, the only BMWs that I knew were the GS, of course, because it's their flagship, and their superbike. Now I started to panic. Here I've sent a deposit on a trip. I'm going to be going to a country where they're going to make me drive on the left side of the road. And God help us if I have to stop, because I'm not going to be able to put my feet down. So there was a local BMW dealer close to my house. I've known him for years. So I went out. It was, I believe, colder weather. I don't think it was riding season. And of course, the salesman meets me shortly inside the door, and he says, "How can I help you?" And I said, "I'm going to be very frank with you." I said, "I'm signed up for a Beaches tour, and I said I need to try on some bikes to see which ones my wife and I would be comfortable on." He said, "We've heard of Beaches. Yeah, take your time. Go look and see what you want. If you have any questions, just ask." So, of course, I go right to the GS, because that's the one that had me up at night, worried about how to hold it. And my wife and I got on, and with our combined weights, it squatted the suspension enough that indeed I was on the balls of my feet. What I didn't take into consideration was I was in a warm building with a very flat cement floor with plenty of traction. And I thought, yeah, I can do this. So I looked at some other models. again, had this in my head that the GS is what everybody rides. That's what you need to ride. Kind of had it in my head that that was my bike. The dealer did, I believe, suggest the R model then, and he might have suggested like a GS 750. So sometime later, I got to meet Rob and Gretchen down at an event in Maryland where they had a booth set up. And I meet Rob, and he doesn't know me, and I don't know him, but he says, looking at your stature, you should be riding an R model. Well, now that Rob does know me, he knows that I'm very stubborn and can make up my own mind on something. So indeed, I picked the GS 1200. Was it a mistake? No, I would not say it was a mistake. It was the wrong choice. And I hate to admit that to Rob now, but it was the wrong choice. But we got through it. Again, with our both of us on the bike, it squatted to the point that I could either touch tippy-toed balls of my feet or shift my butt to one side and get one leg down fairly firm.
Yeah, you were able to stop and plant
Yeah.
almost all the time on that tour.
I was. The day that we rode single, it did not take into consideration that the suspension was going to be higher. Yeah, the Hard Knot Pass trip was eventful.
Yeah, you did. Actually, you did really well in that one, considering, yeah, that's one we've talked about in previous podcasts. Grades up to, what is it, 33%. It's two-way traffic, but really it's about a car wide, sometimes less, sometimes a little more. And yeah, we had to stop several times for traffic coming the other way on one of these grades and gnarly pavement. And but no, you did well for sure.
You're back home talking about it. You did well.
It's amazing what the peer pressure will do to increase your skill and strength. If I drop this, I'm going to get taunted relentlessly. So that's not happening.
And I'm actually past that. I've been taunted quite a bit. So tipping over a motorcycle is no longer an embarrassment. It happens, but I'm on a bike and I'm riding, and that's what it's all about.
That's the biggest lesson to learn right there is, you know what? Everybody falls over. Some people do it a little more frequently, but everybody loses footing somewhere. Everybody has an issue. It isn't that big of a deal. Once the bike goes down, leave it there. Get a picture.
I remember you calling that, it's everybody's safe. Let's calm down. And I chuckled when you say that on tour because I was that guy. I used to be, I guess, had a little more pride, but the bike would fall over and I would refuse help to pick it up and let me get this. I dropped it. I'll pick it up. I guess I've matured. Because now it's like, hey Rob, hey Mike, get over here, help me pick this thing up.
We've all matured. That's the problem.
For some things, maybe. The GS you had too, it was a lowered GS, wasn't it?
I don't believe it was.
No, I don't think I don't think on the TT tour it was. I think it was a standard height.
Again, I knew nothing enough about the models, and in Rob's defense, he offered his advice, and I respectfully declined it. And again, I don't want to say that it ruined our trip, because it did not. One of the things I learned a few days into the trip, the technology on the BMWs, we had these settings of street mode and rain mode and dynamic, I think it was. So we had softened the suspension as much as we could to get that lowered. And it wasn't a scary wobble, but we were getting wallowing in the sweeping corners. So again, once I relaxed a little bit, figured out how to ride on the wrong side of the road or left side of the road, and started to familiarize myself with the bike some more, I started playing with that dynamic. So the dynamic setting came to be my kickstand. In other words, when I would pull out, I'd be in street or soft mode. And then once we'd get riding, I'd click it over to dynamic and it would stiffen up the suspension and the bike handled perfectly. And then as we slowed down or got into town where we had intersection to intersection, I'd soften it back up. So the bike kind of compensated for my weaknesses nicely.
And it's neat that you noticed that, and yeah, we're able to take advantage of the electronic suspension adjustment. Not all of the BMWs have that. That's not a standard option on all of the bikes. It is an option on most, and it works. I mean, it's, as you've discovered, it's really a nice feature.
I'm still baffled by how they do it, but it does indeed work, to the point that, again, I used it as a handicap.
Well, they actually have a servo motor in it that winds the preload up or unwinds it.
Okay.
And then with the dynamic stuff, they also changed some of the dampening within the shock, but it literally is a mechanical change on the preload.
It was incredible. It was quite a few days into the trip that I recalled back to your opening meeting and explaining all the options. And I was like, well, I'm going to try this. And indeed, it worked well.
Yeah, because there's lots going on when you're on one of these trips, especially when we're in the UK, because now you're driving on the opposite side of the road. Add that into, of course, everything else, and then you're on a different bike. And if you're a little bit height challenged, there's a lot going on. So it takes you a few days to kind of get comfortable with it.
You were back on another tour after the TT tour, and that was to the Alps, eh?
That was. And I took your advice, finally, and I used the R model with a lowered seat. For myself, that was perfect. I mean, that bike, if I was in the market to buy that type of a bike, that bike fit me well. I was much more stable. I think my wife enjoyed it just as much. She wasn't up as tall or as high. Yes, that is, for if anybody's considering it, whether it be a tour or a bike, I highly recommend that R version for people of my similar stature.
And that specifically is the 1200 or 1250R, the R1250R.
Yes, the R1250R.
But looking at it, you wouldn't think you'd be as comfortable, would you? Because it looks a little bit sporty and you don't have a fairing, but yet it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, but probably there's more people surprised how comfortable and how happy they are with that 1250, 1200R than with the GS, I would imagine.
Well, the GS is what everyone reads about all the time. You know, what's the bike that you see oodles and oodles and oodles of in the Alps? The GS. But the R is a very capable machine, as is the 1250 RS. The R1250 RS is fundamentally the R model with a fairing on it. So the ergonomics of it, the seat position, foot pegs, handlebars, etc., are quite close to the setup on the regular R model, the naked bike, if you will. And they're both really, really nice machines. Now, my position on the same bike is a little different than Ben's is, because I'm 6'1". I used to be 6'2", but I'm getting older. That's why I don't pick my bikes up anymore either. It's got nothing to do with maturity. I'm getting old. My inseam is about 33.5, and I'm still quite comfortable on that R. One of the neat things about the BMWs is the fact that there are so many different seats available for most of the different models. In addition to some of the bikes having adjustable seats to start with, there are everything from short to extra tall seats available as options. So I take that R and I put an extra tall seat on it, and I'm quite comfortable. You're getting it with the lower seat on it, and you're quite comfortable, and it's working for both of us. So it's pretty neat all-around bike.
I know one tour I did take the RS, and I didn't like it as much. I'm about 6'1", and a lot of my height is in my body, and I found with the RS, too much of my height or too much of my weight was on my wrists. I'm pretty sure, at least from what I remember, it seems like the bars are a little lower in the RS. And we were riding lots in France on that tour, and some of the roads weren't so smooth. And I just found that I was just getting lots of weight on my wrists, and I wasn't overly happy with it. I felt like I wasn't really riding any quicker, better on the smooth stuff than I would have on a GS, and I was less comfortable.
And see, just the opposite for me, that I felt, again, we did this on the Alps trip, and there are some narrower, rougher, I won't say gravelly roads, but I never felt like those higher handlebars and the more dirt bike style would have made a difference. The bike tracked very well, it handled very well, and I didn't feel like, I'm on a sport bike on a gravel road. So yeah, I have to admit, Rob was right. Hate to admit that, but
well, every so often he gets lucky, right? So,
but let me go back to say that the GS was, we made it work.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't like it ruined my trip or anything like that. We made it work.
It just becomes a little bit more work than if you had taken, say, the 1250R instead.
It's more focus. And again, without trying to be an instructor here, there's a lot of things that you learn over the years, as you commented on Hard Knock Pass, where if I had to stop, I had to look ahead to find, as you said, a rock to put my foot down. That applies in a lot of situations. Some of the things I've learned over the years is if you're riding in a group and say, we're going to be stopping for gas or stopping at a restaurant, I've learned to lay back a little bit, because Rob and yourself with your long legs can stop in a heartbeat, put your feet down, turn the bike, and pull into that parking spot. I'm going to be scanning the parking lot to say, there's 3 spots wide. I'm going to go in, because it's on a little bit of a slope going downhill. I'm going to go down, swing back around, and park so that I can pull out of the parking spot. I don't have to back it in with my feet. Or I'll look for a curb. If we're in town and we're stopping at a restaurant and I think, everybody's looking for a place to stop, I'll pull up next to the curb. I can always catch up. So it's not as much work as it's more focus. Just pay attention to your surroundings and figure out a way to get out of it. And again, you don't have to park with the group. The group may all squeeze 6 bikes into 2 spots. I'll park on the other side of the parking lot and walk over.
Yeah. How's it? What's that saying? Work smarter, not harder.
Well, again, it's through tip overs and such, you learn to adapt.
Yep. And thinking ahead is the big thing.
So the second tour you did more like a standard alpine tour, wasn't it?
Yes, it was a classic.
And so how would that have been had you done it on the GS? Had you not done that TT tour? I'm thinking the terrain is so much more. There's so many more off-camber parking lots and things like that.
Similar challenges. I mean, again, the roads were different, but not terribly different. But yes, again, it would have been. I would have had the same challenges, minus the ferries. Gretchen would chuckle because I feared ferries. Again, just because if the guy in front of me stopped and I got stopped right where the lift gate hit the dock, I had an extra 8 inches to put my foot down and didn't have 8 inches to do it. But I think that the challenges would have been the same regardless of what tour it is. The challenges would be the same here in the States, because you're always going to find that off-camber parking lot or road or intersection that has that dip. So again, it goes back to what Rob said. It's not harder. It's just you need to work smarter.
Yeah, for sure. You've taken the Colin Edwards school there. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's Disneyland for grown men. I recommend it. I've been there 3 times, trying to get a group together to go again. Been trying to get that cohort of yours there, Rob, to go, but his schedule limits his time. It's very good.
I've got a whole summer now, it seems.
Let's go. What are you doing next weekend? Let's go.
Highly recommend it. And that was I wanted to touch base on that. I mean, I'm 60 years old, but I still do things like that. And although I do them for the enjoyment, you'll still learn by going to things like that.
Yeah, but Ben, what are you learning? You're driving around in circles in the mud. How could that possibly apply to the road?
Actually down there it's not circles. They lay out multiple courses. It's quite an interesting place. They've got a saloon style bar with bedrooms in it, or what did they call bunkhouses? Excuse me. So you get on there as a group. You sleep in the bunkhouse. You go to the bar. Or saloon, as they call it. The food is outstanding. They have some ladies come in there. They usually do a barbecue. The one time I was down, we did a crawfish deal. And then you ride their bikes. They have an assortment of guns there that they shoot on one day. Anything from a 50 cal to skeet to handguns. And they have all the beer you can drink. They simply have one rule. When you open your first can of beer, you are done with motorcycles and you are done with guns. So it's quite simple, but you can ride as much as your body will allow you to ride. They get up in the morning, they have breakfast. They will do some drills. It's not as technical as some of the other riding schools, but if you want to learn, they will teach you things on a motorcycle. And in the 3 times I've been there, there's been quite a few people that never rode in dirt. And once they overcame that fear of the dirt, they learned that the geometry of a motorcycle in the dirt is the same as the geometry on a motorcycle on the street. Again, it's what you make of it. They do have races in the evening some nights then for whoever wants to do it. They're not forced to race. If you want to sit on the porch and watch everybody else, that's fine. They usually have professional riders there. And again, if you're struggling with something, whether it be mid-corner speed or why am I doing this? Why am I doing that? Body position. Just grab one of the instructors and say, hey, and he'll take you over to another part of the farm where they have another course. He'll work on whatever you want to work on. So again, it doesn't matter how old you are, you can always learn something new that just helps you be a better rider. And my days of trying to get faster are gone. It's just now that satisfaction of, wow, I did better today than I did yesterday.
So that's been my advice to many people when they're getting started as a new rider is, do you know somebody with a dirt bike? Will they take you out? And often they say, oh, well, that's dirt biking. What has that got to do with the streets? And you try to explain to them it's all about throttle control and balancing the bike, proper foot placement and the weight placement. There's a whole ton of things that you learn learning it at slower speed. You're learning it on a bike that if it falls down, you'll pick it up and you might scratch a $20 piece of plastic and you don't care anyways because it's built to do that. So there's so many advantages to honing your skills on a bike like that, which is probably why the best riders in the world still use that form of riding, racing to really keep themselves in check.
Well, and to a certain degree, it's learning to ride the bike out of control. And I don't mean out of control as in your feet are off the pegs and you're flying over the bars, but when that tire skips a little bit or when the tire slides a little bit. Dirt's a little more forgiving than the street. But if you feel that on the dirt, that translates to the street that say you drag the back brake a little. I'm talking now like a beginning rider, but you lock that rear brake up and the back wheel steps out a little bit. If you've never felt that before, that just aggravates the situation and makes you panic even more. Whereas the more you feel that on the dirt, you're subconsciously just ignore it when it happens on the street. So again, riding out of control doesn't mean totally out of control. It just means, oh, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago. We used to call that driving to work in Thunder Bay in the wintertime. Rear-wheel drive car and driving down the road, the back end's a little bit sideways. Yeah, whatever. That's the normal operation. But now all the new vehicles, they pretty much won't let you do that.
Yep, they're getting really boring, aren't they?
They are.
Well, and the other thing that's available to people that's free, and that is slow riding in a parking lot. And again, back to my stature and being short, that's where I'm most unstable. When I'm going down the road at 50 mile an hour, physics takes over and the bike's going to go straight. I encourage people all the time, find an empty parking lot, get yourself some whatever, grab socks out of your hamper and spread them around and do figure eights and practice stopping and starting and stopping on the left side, stopping on the right side. Rob and I disagree about that. Rob, instructs people don't put your outriggers out, but again, he's got a foot of height on me as well. So in my situation, particularly when I have a passenger, I put the outriggers out because if they bobble slightly, I've got the balls of my feet to catch us on. Again, I've done that. I've gotten in a funk with riding, and I'll go and just do slow speed figure eights and hard braking, come up to a wall of cones and try to get it stopped as quickly as I can. And again, it puts you in that situation where, the back tire stepped out there. But it did it in a parking lot. It didn't do it with, two kids walking across the street in front of you. Push your limits in a safe environment. And that goes back to Texas. You can push your limits as far as you want. You break the clutch lever, they'll put another one on and push you back out there.
Yeah, because the speeds are so much lower, you're less likely to get hurt.
Yeah.
There's nothing. You can separate a shoulder walking across the living room, but but you're less likely to.
Yeah, Gretchen's actually headed off to take a dirt school. She's going off to BJ Hessler's DC Dirt Camp, which is in Northern Virginia, and she's going to do that later on either this month or early next month. That's sponsored by the AMA and chartered by the Dirt Bike Training School. It's a chartered dirt bike training school in Northern Virginia. And as she is a bit nervous about riding on the street and riding bigger bikes, she needs the confidence to develop the confidence of a variety of circumstances and actual control of the motorcycle before she gets out in traffic. And I think that's a great way to do it. We all could benefit from spending time running around in the parking lot and just refreshing what we know. I'm here now getting ready to start riding for the springtime, and I am very, very enthused about the fact that we've got a couple of malls in the area here that have gone out of business, and they've got huge parking lots and nothing going on in them. So when the weather comes right, which it's getting better and better all the time, I'm going to be out playing around and doing exactly that myself, because it's been 6 months since I've been on the street. So to get reacquainted with the motorcycle, and the bike that I'm riding now is one that I haven't had in my garage for a decade. So it's back here again, and it's time for me to get acclimated to riding the old R90 again.
Well, there are a few advantages to living here. I think there's 3. But anyways, so where we are, there's not a lot of people. Not a lot of people has advantages and disadvantages disadvantage is you're not going to have a big stadium. You're not going to have big bands come. You're not going to have all the new whatever kind of stores or even a bloody BMW dealer within 1,000 kilometers. But because there's no people to support it. The good part is things like dirt riding. Well, there's endless dirt roads around here. I have a KTM EXC 525, so it's street legal, so I can leave my garage. I can be on a hydro right away. There's pits around us, but in 10 minutes I can be on the hydro line. Off I go. I can be riding for hours and never be farther than really 20 minutes from my house. If I jump on the highway, get tired, think, oh crap, I should probably be home now. Jump on the highway, come home. I'm home in 20 minutes. So it's nice this time of year. Like you said, I haven't been riding much. Things are starting to melt. Jump on the dirt bike, and it certainly hones your skills. Really look where you want to go. Don't look at that stone that you're heading right for, because you really don't want to hit that. And planning your track, because there's the stone or there's the river. It's really good for honing your skills. I find balance and body positioning. And on a bike, again, that if it falls down 4 times, oh well, it'll be fine. Pick it up and away we go. It's not a big deal.
You can always improve. I mean, again.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not improvement. I mentioned earlier, it's not improvement to say, oh, my lap times are getting faster. It gets to a point where it's not about that. It's just about being a better rider. You're going to help yourself. You're going to help your passenger. And you're going to help the people that are riding in your group if you happen to be in a group. So it's exposing yourself to the limits of yourself, which we all know are changing. But it's finding the limits and being comfortable at those limits.
Certainly, yeah, just smoothing things out. Like you said, yeah, it's not really about being faster. That sometimes comes, but at a certain age too, that gets limited. But certainly being smoother and less panicked about things, having a plan, and that's what avoids, like you're saying earlier, some of the tip overs and everything, because you're looking far ahead. You can see what's coming up, and you can react in time, hopefully.
I must tell this story. It makes everybody's ride more enjoyable. On our first tour, and I'll reflect back on this, Rob, we got over to England, my wife and I. My wife enjoys riding. She maybe is not as adventurous as I am, but she enjoys being on the back of a motorcycle. And I get there, and I'm excited to be out of the country for the first time, and I'm got this brand new motorcycle, and I'm all revved up. I'm geared up. And not that I was riding recklessly, but I was not smooth. Part of that was my fault. Part of that was not understanding the motorcycle. So I don't recall how many days it was, but we stopped, I believe, for lunch. And Rob puts his arm around me and says, walk with me. So he takes me one direction, and Gretchen takes my wife the other direction. And my wife was a little nervous and maybe not sitting properly or being tense. So little did we know that Rob and Gretchen had already worked this out, that we needed to be spoken to. For lack of a better description, I call it rammy. I was on the gas hard, on the brakes hard. I was excited about being in Europe. Rob says, just smooth out, calm down. And the other thing that I was doing that really wasn't my fault was, again, I've been riding most of the time on my Harley, which was lugging the motor at 2,000, 2,500, roll it on, and the thing would decelerate and slow down. Well, the BMWs, although they're a very linear motor, they need to be revved a little bit. So kind of pulled us both aside. And of course, we get back on the bike and we're on the intercom. And what did she say to you? And what did he say to me? And we kind of compared notes. And I took what Rob said to heart. And I thanked him after the trip because it made our trip more enjoyable. So again, you can always learn. You can always improve.
We didn't go any slower either, did we?
No, we didn't. It was just, I mean, as he's talking to me, I could have very easily told him, I know what I'm doing. I've been riding all my life. Leave me alone. But I listened to him. And I, to this day, I thank him because it made, more importantly, it probably made my wife's trip more enjoyable because her head was banging off the back of my helmet. And the jerkier I was, the tenser she became. Till the end of the 3 weeks, to the fact that she made me buy one of those buddy belts because she could hold on to me because she was paranoid about not having a backrest. Another piece of advice that Rob tried to correctly tell us about. Till the end of the trip, I didn't even know she was back there. I mean, she's hardly holding on. She's taking pictures. She's enjoying the ride. So
and
again,
we still weren't going any slower.
No, we like to say we were having a spirited pace.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's when it gets really magical because the passenger is as relaxed as you are up front. And then it turns into something that's special and a whole lot better. And that's something that you're not unique in at all, Ben. We see that a lot. And it's simply the difference between riding in many places in the States and riding in many places in Europe, is that there is a whole lot more on and off the gas in Europe than there is here. Our roads tend to be engineered in such a way that you can keep a fairly steady speed. And unless you're really charging, most of the roads that we've got, you're rolling it on and rolling it off and rolling it on and rolling it off, and occasionally on the brakes hard and occasionally rolling it on hard for a pass. But the rest of the time, it's all pretty easy. And then when we get someplace that's a little challenging with the passenger on the back, and we're doing it day in and day out, it changes because there's more gas. We're on the gas harder. We're on the gas more often. We're off the gas harder. We're off the gas more often. It does make a difference when you're on the back. I love to ride as a passenger on the back of a bike, but there aren't many bikes that I'll sit on the back of, or many riders whose bikes I'll sit on the back of. But you get somebody who's smooth and consistent, and it's a delight. It really is. So,
the other thing too is, of course, in North America, we're stop and go. So you're on the highway, of course, you're going, but we use traffic lights and stop signs everywhere. So you're either going or you're stopping. It's one of the two. We don't use roundabouts. We're starting to see them a bit. I don't know about your area around here, not much, but
Mike, in the 3 towns adjacent to me, we have one red light or intersection.
Oh, really?
Traffic light, yes. A roundabout, I followed Rob.
So, but in Europe, you tend to see a lot of the roundabouts. So it's not just a stop sign, stop, look, go. They tend to do a lot more, especially in the UK, right? There's a bloody roundabout, it seemed, like every block. And so you're shifting up, shifting down, shifting up, shifting down. You're on the gas, and it's not stop, then go. You're looking at traffic. So, yeah, it's quite a bit different. And yeah, just the sheer amount of shifting you do, more so on an alpine type tour where you're doing the mountain passes, because it's bang, 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 down your gears into your hairpin, then shift up, 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 and then you're into the next hairpin, bang, 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 down the gears. And yeah, you're only going to do that 20 or 30 times for the one side of the pass. And so, yeah, if you're jerky on the throttle or bad on your downshifts, it's no one's having fun.
Well, again, we still talk about that it just made her trip so much better.
And no backrest necessary.
That was another piece of advice. My wife, you got to understand, we're riding a Harley Ultra, the comfy couch. She sits on the back, props her feet up, lays her elbows out on the armrest. Couldn't fall off if I tried to push her off. So her paranoia.
And I've tried.
Her paranoia, where my paranoia was the height of the bike, her paranoia was I must have a backrest. And again, back to when we met Rob in Maryland, she was insisting, I believe, that I need a backrest. And Rob's like, no, you'll be fine. You won't need a backrest. And once Rob convinced me to just calm down and enjoy the trip and ride the bike a little differently, she did. This trip in Europe, she really enjoyed, because midway through the trip, we met up with an older gentleman that was on the trip, and we decided to ride with him because he was enjoyable to be around. And he somewhat slowed the pace a little bit, but that was in a good way. And she still talks about that she enjoyed, again, not that we're driving recklessly, but she could really just sit back and relax. So yeah, she's come a long way. I've come a long way, and the bike helped a lot.
Well, you see how kind of almost one action leads to another, in that if she has a backrest and you can't push her off, no matter how hard you've tried, you don't have to be smooth on the throttle, because it's a big, long bike. She's leaning back. You're not going to clunk helmets. You can hammer on the gas. It's not a big deal. So now she gets on the back of this bike with no backrest and thinking, Jesus, next time he hammers on the throttle, what do I have to hang on to? Because you didn't have to worry about that before, because you had the backrest. She's not going to go anywhere. So it's like a combination of things, right? So you get a little bit smoother. She learns to relax because she knows that, oh, okay, he's not going to do this.
In her defense, there was a slight bit of history there. We may have only been dating. I know we were in our 20s, and we were at Bike Week one year, and we pulled into a gas station. I was on a Honda Hawk, I believe, a GT, with no backrest. And we fueled up, came out to the street. We were in downtown Daytona, and the light changed, and I tried to beat the traffic coming towards us, accelerated briskly, and went to turn to say, are we good? and she was sitting on her behind in the parking lot of the gas station.
Ooh, bad move.
And she still
bad.
married
So,
you?
yes. So in her defense, she has legitimate reasons to be concerned about some of my decision making on a motorcycle.
Yeah, that goes way beyond helmet clunks, you know.
Yes.
That's way.
Yes. And, women have very good memories. She still has not forgotten that.
Yeah, for sure. It's amazing how they can remember. They'll remember the exact day and everything else. They don't remember like what size socket to adjust the rear suspension of the motorcycle. That's impossible. But
Never knew she came off. I pulled out, started down the road. We didn't have an intercom at the moment. Turned to talk to her, and she was gone. I looked back, and I thought for a second if I wanted to go back. I wasn't sure that was the right move either.
Was your trip to the Isle of Man the first time you were overseas, Ben?
It was. So that added a little bit into my excitement. Again, I'm from very rural Pennsylvania. I mean, for me to get to an airport is a 2-hour ride. I was nervous about signage. I was nervous about, obviously, the left side of the road. Although I must admit, I was really surprised at how quickly I adapted to the left. Again, first 3 days, nervous. And maybe a week in, I said to Kathy, I said, wow, I'm really getting used to this. Like, I don't have to focus as much on go left in the roundabout, or when you got to the intersection, look right, turn left. So yeah, in hindsight, that was surprising that I adjusted to it as quickly as I did. To the point that when I got back home, I had to focus for a day or two to readjust
to the other way.
To the other way. Yeah.
Did you ever catch yourself on the wrong side or about to turn the wrong side once you got home?
I believe that happened. I had left work. It was after a long day, and it was somewhat of a 2-lane road, but the road kind of made an S bend and joined another road. And I, by myself and not focused, and I kind of remember going, oh, no, you got to be on this side. But that only happened once.
I came back from a trip in England and was riding with some friends over here, and I rode 4 miles down the road on the left side. I was leading the group. And 4 miles down the road on the left side, and I got to a stop sign or something or other, and they pulled up next to me, and it just didn't look right. And I'm thinking, what's going on here? They thought that I was just playing around, but I was where I was supposed to be and couldn't figure out what they were doing. Yeah, I had to unwind my head from that one.
Yeah, once I got home from the trip we were on together there, it was like a couple days afterwards. I pulled out of a parking lot at a park nearby. I'm in the truck, and I pulled out on the wrong side of the road, and there's no traffic on the road, and that's often part of when these things happen, right? If there's a car on the road, right away it cues you, but when there's no traffic, I just went to the wrong side of the road. I'm driving. I'm thinking, what? Like you said, Rob, what's wrong here? I'm thinking, well, look right, drive left. Look right. No, wait, I'm at home. Shit. Back over to the other side of the road. Like, okay, I got this. Yeah, and maybe a little bit of jet lag in there too. It can do different things to our brains, but yeah.
So it didn't take you too long to get used to riding on the left and dealing with all of that, and it didn't take you too long to unwind it coming back home. Would you say that is something that is easier because you've spent time on racetracks and you've spent time picking your own line through corners versus simply being somebody that rides between the center line and the shoulder of the road? There's
something to that, yes. Again, I think it falls back to the look ahead, think ahead, plan ahead. I don't know if it's as much to do with the racetrack, although you do train your eye to look up and look around and
choose your own line. I mean, if you're on a racetrack, you're choosing your own line, and you know darn well that there are a whole lot of street riders that don't have any concept of what a line through a corner is, and they simply are equidistant between the fog line on the right and the center line in the middle of the road.
Exactly.
Well, that goes back to, of course, what Ben was saying earlier about pulling in a parking lot, and what you're saying, Rob, is that when you're riding, you're formulating a plan at every corner. Really, you're picking your line in your head. Here's my plan. I'm going here. I'm looking for the pothole, the cow, the dog, the whatever, and you're formulating your plan to go through that turn. Just as Ben was saying, as he's pulling into the parking lot, he's planning all the time. When we pull in a parking lot, it's like
more often than I have to focus on things you don't. have to give
Yeah.
thought to.
But on the road, even though that lends itself to that, and that's the training when you're riding at these racetracks or at a higher speeds when you're doing all the time, is you have a plan in your head as to what you're doing, as opposed to the Sunday drive. As long as I'm between the goalposts, it doesn't really matter, and that's okay. Certainly, some of the times, if you have that plan in mind all the time, it sets you up better for when there are mistakes, when the deer jumps out, when the car all of a sudden comes in your lane.
Well, and back to your track day thing, Rob. Before I started riding on the track, we were those group of guys that went out on the road and just rode crazy. I never saw the trees. I never saw the rocks. I never saw the gravel in the middle of the road. And then we started doing track days where you could push your limits. And if you did mess up, you just ran off in the grass and slowed down and got back on again. Although it made me a better rider, when I went back to the street and got with some of them old buddies that still were doing that, it's amazing the number of rocks and trees and things that you start to say, well, if this happened, I'd be going straight to there. And wow, that could hurt. So again, that's options for people is get on a track day. You don't have to go out there to try to set track records, but you will learn a lot about your limits and the limits of your bike.
And it's a lot of fun.
And it is.
So how did you find the continent and the Alps and the countries that you went through on the Alpine adventure in comparison to the UK or back home? Was that a big eye-opener for you?
First, the UK. Gretchen had actually asked us after the tour, would we go back for the TT? And I said, that I'd have to give some thought to, but I would definitely go back to England and Scotland and Wales for the scenery. I mean, I went there. Yeah, it was a 3-week trip. Yeah, we were going to go to Wales and Scotland and England, but I was going there to see the TT. If you put on your schedule next year a similar tour without the TT, I would sign up. I was very impressed with Wales. I have some family history in Wales, so I had a definite interest in that, which I thought was beautiful. And then when we got to North Scotland, if you'd have told me it was that beautiful, I don't think of Scotland as being a beautiful country. And then the Alps, they're on the next level. You guys have touched on this before. I think you could ride the same roads back and forth for 3 weeks and it would look totally different every day. I mean, we had some days where it was overcast, but it was still gorgeous. And then we had days that it was beautiful that you'd think, wow, you wouldn't have seen that in the fog, but yet the fog looked great. Just the other week we were going back through pictures again because it was too cold to ride, and it just gets the juices going. I mean, you want to go back. And I know you have some tour members that have made multiple trips to the Alps, and before we went, my wife was like, well, why would you want to go see the same thing twice? And now it's like, if time and money would afford it, I'd be there every year. It's just it's unbelievable. It's
magic.
The gentleman that was on the tour with us, who has been on quite a few of your tours, said the Alps are just magical. And he's something, I think he's been there quite a few times. That's Mr. Troutman.
Yep.
Because I thought the same thing. Why would you just want to go back to the same place? I would go back to both places. Although I do want to put on our bucket list some other trips we have in mind. Yeah, I don't even know how to describe to somebody how it is.
So you must have a bunch of motorcycle friends. You probably showed them some pictures, or they saw your pictures on Buckface. And
yep.
Do they get it, or do you think they get it? Because it's very tough, right?
It is, and unfortunately, the pictures just don't do it justice. I mean, they're beautiful pictures. Don't get me wrong, and people are like, "Wow, that could be a postcard." But when you've seen it, and it's, I don't want to say 3-dimensional, but it's almost that effect. It's awe-inspiring, and you go around a corner and you say to your passenger, "Wow, I think that's fabulous." And 3 minutes later, you go around another corner and you forget about the last thing you saw because this one's even better. So yeah, I'm not sure it was a good idea for us to review the pictures because it just got us wound up, and here we are mid-January and can't do a thing about it.
Well, the other thing is, and I sometimes think, I don't want to harp on Europe is so great. North America there's lots of great things about it too. It just, but hey, I'm happy living here, but that's part of it, right? None of us could probably afford to really live there. We could certainly not the houses we have and the yards we have, anything. But we went to Europe many times, and Bonnie talk to her sister about her trips and talk about how much fun we had. And finally, it was, maybe 10 years, her sister and her husband went on a tour. They're not motorcycle riders. They went to France and Greece and a couple other spots, I believe. And when her sister came home, she said, I get it. I finally get it. You talked for years about how much fun you had there, how much you enjoyed it, but I never really got it until I went there, because it's more than just the scenery. It's the pace of life, and nobody cares if you take your glass of wine and go sit over there. There's not a guardrail around every little thing. No, they expect you. You're an adult. Hey, if you want to step too close to the edge of cliff, you fall off. Oh, whatever. That's your problem. We hope you don't, but you're treated more as an adult. But with that comes responsibilities, and that's, I think, part of the problems we have in this country. We don't want both of those or one of those. Anyways, it's more than just the riding, right? It's the full experience of all that stuff encapsulated together. It's really magical. Someone really smart said one time.
And on that note, other than the scenery and the adventure, the other thing we talk about a lot is 2 years ago, I didn't know either of you gentlemen. And we came on a tour, and of course I met Rob, and then this guy Mike's hanging around. We still talk about how our little group in England, Mike, which was Joe and you and I, and then we picked up Bill. And it's just kind of interesting how the little nuances of the group work out. I mean, there's couples that just want to go by themselves. I enjoyed the fact that I got to be friends with you. We enjoyed the trip. We had our riding capabilities were very similar. So nobody was grumbling about, Ben's bringing up the rear again. I mean, although, again, we weren't riding excessively fast, but
if anybody brought up their rear, it was probably me.
I mean, it was a spirited pace. So we talk about that and that whole group in general. I mean, being our first trip, we had to ask at one point, does everybody get along this well? That group was so diverse. I mean, from the country boy that I am to people who live in New York City and Long Island, and yet everybody clicked. We didn't all agree on different aspects of riding or what we wanted to go see, and then that same thing happened again in Germany this year. As I spoke of earlier, halfway through the trip, we partnered up with an older gentleman out of Virginia. We enjoyed just riding with him and he was a Southern gentleman. And we still talk about how much enjoyment we got out of that. Again, we've made friends on the tours, although, I mean, we've made friends through motorcycles all of our lives, but that really impressed me. Other than the riding and other than the scenery, through Facebook, we're friends with a lot of the people that were on those tours.
For sure, that's one thing I've noticed about these tours is I've met definitely the most interesting people on these tours who have just super different backgrounds and an array of experiences and that. And someday on a podcast, I'll tell the story about the time Larry and his wife had a few too many drinks in the bar, but not this one. But it's everybody, if you can appreciate that everybody's bringing something to the table and appreciate them for who they are and just enjoy. It's really neat. It's neat meeting new people.
And I think that one of the things that's special is that people who are traveling overseas or traveling to different places are doing so out of curiosity. They're doing so generally without a preconceived notion of what they're getting into, or maybe they do have a preconceived notion, but they're curious enough to go check it out and see if it's real. You've got people that are not egotistical, although they could be, because boy, the people that come with us have done so many things and they've got such incredibly diverse backgrounds that there's a lot of accomplishment there on every tour with a group that's there, and yet we're all having a great time doing what it is at the moment, and that's something that's really special.
It's how quick you can make those relationships, and all it takes is that connection of we both love motorcycles. Okay, so I think to wrap this up, we need to get to the lightning round.
Uh-oh.
Let's hear it.
Okay, so roughly first thing comes to mind. Favorite motorcycle magazine?
Cycle News.
Favorite motorcycle movie?
No, the name is slipping me. The Apex, the MotoGP movie.
Sorry, missing the Apex, was that one or something? Or not missing?
Hitting the Apex. There you go.
If it's missing Apex, it would be the documentary about me. Okay.
Yeah.
You have a favorite motorcycle book?
I don't read books.
Okay, we're going with that. Hardest motorcycle lesson you've learned.
Don't fall down in turn 2 of Trailway Speedway when you're running second to the pack, because the last guy will run over you.
Tinted shield or sunglasses?
Sunglasses.
Mountains or ocean?
Oh, mountains.
City or countryside?
From the country, buddy.
Goats or cows?
Cows.
Ninjas or pirates?
Pirates.
Favorite motorcycle podcast?
Of course, Beach's Motorcycle Adventures.
Right on, Ben. Okay, I think that's a wrap then for us. I'm on a scotch.
It must be really cold up there, Mike, for you to be drinking all this scotch in the afternoon.
You have enough antifreeze in the system, you can't possibly freeze. So that was right on. It was great talking to Ben. And we'd ask everybody to subscribe to this podcast, because if we get enough subscriptions, maybe I can get an alcohol sponsor, because I'm a civil servant. I need something to supplement my income here. But that's it, and I guess we'll talk again next Friday, Robbie.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, Mike.
Was it my imagination, or was Ben getting short with me? We haven't started recording yet, have we?